Yes.
All righty, good evening. Oh, here comes Victoria. Excellent. We'll give her just a second to settle in.
We're so glad you're here.
All right, if you'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you again for joining us this evening for our Board of Directors meeting. We will go ahead and get started with the land acknowledgement, and Vice President Perkins has that.
Thank you. Evergreen Public Schools resides on the traditional lands of the Chinookan peoples and the Cowlitz tribe. They have lived on and cared for this land and its waterways since time immemorial. We thank them for their stewardship and make this acknowledgement to open a space of recognition, inclusion, and respect for all Indigenous students, families, and staff in our community.
Thank you, Rob. All right, next on our agenda is to adopt this evening's agenda. If we'll entertain a motion for that.
I move adoption of the agenda as presented.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. All right, next up is special recognition. We love this evening. It's our Evergreen Awards. We're going to call Janae Gomes up to make the introductions. Hi, Janae.
Thank you for having me. This evening we have our Evergreen Awards for this quarter. As a reminder, we have 3 categories: a classified, certificated, and an administrator award. This evening we're going to start with our classified. If you want to come on. We have Tony Bagnell from Cascade Middle School, and Allison Harding will be talking about her. And then afterwards, Tony has some family that will have her recognize as well.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. I couldn't be happier to be here tonight with Tony Bagnell, one of our amazing Cascade staff. Tony is a huge part of our school community and has a huge heart for students. She shows up each day positive, professional, and does whatever she can to help eliminate barriers for parents and students. Tony is our budget and athletic secretary, but it's not unusual to see her helping set up for student recognition ceremonies, supporting students at basketball games, or in some instances, taking out her sewing machine to help tailor a uniform for a student. Tony's always willing to go above and beyond to support students. She's an inspiration to our building and always strives to provide an environment of excellence. There could not be a more deserving person for this award. I'd like to read some of the things that Tony's colleagues wrote about her in their nominations. So Stephanie Gowan says, Tony is the driving force of our building. She works hard to develop relationships with all students at Cascade while promoting every sport, activity, and opportunity. She's an advocate for staff as well as students, supplying classrooms with what is needed, encouraging teachers and classified staff to remain unified, organizing the school calendar, and all of the gears that run tirelessly behind the scenes. Our athletic programs have seen a rise in participation because of her, and Cascade extracurricular activities would not happen without her recruitment, organization, and hard work. Students are comfortable approaching her with questions, and she goes above and beyond to help each individual student. Kyle Croston says, Tony keeps our athletic department running very efficiently. She's extremely helpful in all areas, and we couldn't do our jobs without her. She goes the extra mile for students, athletes, families, and coaches. Sherry Myers says, our athletic department would not function without Tony. She's patient, sincere, thoughtful, and extremely caring towards our students, staff, and coaches. And Tyler Wooldridge says, Tony has continued to go above and beyond throughout her years as our secretary. Whenever a student or staff needs assistance, Tony is always willing to accommodate their needs. I have worked with Tony for the past 8 school years. We have worked together through coaching, security, and now as a teacher. The impact Tony has on the daily operations and success of our school building is bar none. So congratulations, Tony.
it on? Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you. I feel very honored and I feel very blessed to be at Cascade. My kids all went to Cascade. So for me, it's like family. I love working with Ian and Allison and everybody else. And so I look forward to many more years at Cascade. And I'll try to keep doing a good job. Oh, and this is my cheering section. This is my husband, Mark, my daughter, Whitney, her mother-in-law, Amabilia, and my 10-day-old grandson, Callan. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you. We appreciate what you do.
Thank you. And Ian, thanks for joining as well. At the end, we're going to ask all three to come back and do a picture with you. So just wanted to share that. Our certificated award is going to be going to Debbie Fowler, who's a school nurse, and Kate Winters is going to be talking.
Hello, thank you. So I have been the health services manager since September of this year, and one of the first people that reached out to me to really get to know me and welcome me was Debbie Fowler. She has really gone out of her way to make me feel welcome. After I started kind of decorating my office and putting up some window stickers with trees and birds. And the next week, Debbie actually saw my office and she brought me a colorful canvas print with birds on it and a wooden birdhouse along with a special cake. Debbie's peers say that she is a thoughtful and considerate friend and school nurse. She's thorough, dedicated equally to students, staff, buildings, and her peers. She has caught several serious health conditions or specific moments at her school already this year and shows compassion when completing every task or interaction with families or EPS staff. She's an exemplary nurse and is very empathetic. She cares for everyone that she comes in contact with, and it's an honor to know her. Recently, she just had a student that had a very complex and serious health condition, and Debbie just jumped right in. She researched the condition. She went to work to make sure that there was a very good plan in place. And not only that, but we actually met with, she asked me to be there with her, and we met with the school administrators, the teachers, the support staff, all together so that she could help coordinate the care and keep everybody informed. It is my honor to be here to give Debbie Feller the Evergreen Award.
Yeah. Yay.
I just want to say thank you. I'm very honored.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our final one this evening is Carrie Fansler, and the Director of Teaching and Learning, Tilly Meyer, is going to speak to you.
Good evening. I'm so excited to be here to speak about Carrie. Carrie Fansler, she's our learning design specialist, and I wanted to let you know that she was nominated by Tiffany Riando, instructional coach at Shehala. And I also want to say that the words I'm going to say to you tonight are what we all believe about Carrie. She's just such a wonderful person. Carrie Fansler is the backbone of strong instruction in our district. Take one look at her calendar, and you will see how she supports literally every building in our district and our top leaders. Without Carrie, our instructional coaching program would be adrift. And without strong coaching, we don't have strong professional growth for our teachers and administrators. Carrie believes in the Care Bear stare of coaching, supporting the staff she is working alongside to unlock their best selves in service of children. Carrie believes we are all learners, and she is an expert at growing professionals so they can grow kids. Carrie puts in countless hours, even working weekends. I know this. She bakes at night in order to provide warm gathering spaces for teachers and administrators for the next morning. She does this all behind the scenes. And by the way, her cookies rival that of crumble cookies. I'm going to tell you this right now. Yes. she she gives of herself so that others shine, and she hides in the shadows while we all take our moments in the sun. Our students don't know who she is, but some of their best learning moments are in direct relation to the work she has done with the adults they do know. To speak personally, Carrie's belief in me makes me believe in myself. That goes for all of us. She is a gifted listener who allows me to be my whole authentic self so that I can be vulnerable and grow. She always is beside me in my work, always uplifting in her approach, and inspires me to be my best self. Through that work, I'm able to work with the teachers in my building to hopefully inspire them to be their best selves. Carrie's work then trickles into every classroom in my building and in all the buildings. But it isn't just my building. She's doing that work day in and day out in every building with every coach. Her work touches the lives of every child in our district in a way that literally no other person in our organization does. It is hard to find a staff member who works on growing other adults in this district who hasn't been coached and inspired by Carrie. Call anyone in curriculum and instruction, ask the equity department, reach out to any coach, call any admin team. Carrie Fansler has touched every part of this district. The breadth and depth of her work is seen everywhere. Trace any light or growth in this district, and I'm willing to bet that somewhere near the source is Carrie Fansler. I'm so honored to, give this award. I'm getting teared up now.
Well, keeping it together during that was one thing. It is truly, thank you so much. And thank you to the students, teachers, administrators, and instructional coaches every day in our work collectively to elevate students in their learning. It is truly the privilege of my life to sit at the feet of teachers and students alongside instructional coaches to improve student learning here. And I am so grateful for all of these years to hone our collective skills, and so excited that we have so much more to do, right, together. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to instructional coaches, C&I friends, equity team, everybody. This is, it's overwhelming and enjoyous, and a little bright spot in this year and in my career here too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. It's always such an honor to have our employees recognized. And so we're going to do a picture with the board, with the three.
Up front.
She's okay, but her was this long.
Well, that was fun. It's always a good night when we get to recognize our great staff. So thank you, Janae.
I know.
All right, next up on the agenda is our board consent agenda. We'll entertain a motion for approval.
I move approval of the board's consent agenda as presented.
Seconded?
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, next up is the superintendent consent agenda. Same drill.
I move for adoption of the superintendent's consent agenda as presented.
Seconded?
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Perfect. All right, we'll go ahead and move on then to matters reserved for board action. This is our 2023-2024 school calendar. It's our second reading. I believe Janae is going to come back up to the podium to talk to us about the calendar. And just for clarification for the audience, we have reviewed this in workshop and had a first reading, and so now it's our second reading.
Thank you for having me this evening. It's okay. To talk about the calendar. So as you have just mentioned, we have brought this to workshop and through first reading. This calendar has not changed as far as the days, so that is the same as what has been before you. The reason why we are behind on schedule is we had some constraints that we needed to work through. So in order just to provide some context for you, prior to asking you to approve the calendar for next school year, is we were, like I said, met with constraints regarding instructional minutes for students. There were multiple and constraining factors with respect to transporting students to school. So one of the constraints is, the traffic pattern in the city has, a lot more traffic, and the buses aren't able to get kids to school all the time when they're supposed to. We have 3 times that school starts, 3 different tiers that we call them. And in between those tiers, the time has gotten smaller, so the turnaround hasn't allowed for, them to get there. So we needed to fix a couple of these concerns, so that way we were allowed to have adequate time between the tiers. And what you see before you is a recommendation of changing some of the times of the schools in order to help with this. And in the tiers, it isn't as simple as just picking a school and adjusting it and making those changes. There's also, a number of buses you have to do in each of the tiers and what that looks like and for the adjustments. And so we are recommending to adjust times next year to match this, and it will hopefully be able to fix our concern around getting all of the kids to school on time, meet all of our minimal instructional minutes, and I think that addresses all of it. Anything that you would add, Superintendent Boyd?
No, just I was part of, in and out of all of the multiple meetings that we had related to this with our transportation department, instructional department. I know that we've worked with our union partners as well. So I want to thank all of them, including our EEA, for working with us to make sure that we got this change in. And the only thing I would add was that it also gives our drivers their 30-minute breaks, and so we meet those requirements as well, and gives them an opportunity to not have to rush so that students get to school safely and on time.
Do you have any questions about any of it?
Questions from the board?
I think I got my questions answered offline. The rest of us, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So at this time, we'll entertain a motion from the board.
I'll move adoption of the proposed school calendar for the 2023-2024 school year.
Second.
All right, so moved and seconded. Is there questions from the audience? All right, seeing none, is there any further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is our superintendent report. Superintendent Boyd?
Thank you. So we had a great day on the Hill yesterday in the state capitol, and directors Bradford and Perkins, myself and Dr. Williams were able to connect with at, I think, an opportune moment to just remind them of the needs that we have. We advocated specifically around funding for special education and funding for transportation. We're projecting a $12 million shortfall for special education that's not being funded by the state, so we're pushing really hard to get some help in that area, and about $2 million for transporting our students and mainly our most vulnerable students that we get to and from school for special circumstances. So speaking of the budget, I am finalizing our budget reduction recommendations to the board, and we will be sending our recommended budget cuts out to the community next week. We have a full report for the board Tuesday, March 14th at that board meeting. And just to remind people that 90 cents of every dollar that we get for funding goes to staffing. So there will be impacts on staff. We don't take that lightly. It's a gut-wrenching process. It's going to be a challenge for us, and it represents about 5% of our budget. I don't know if you saw the Columbia Today. In the Columbian Today, there was an article about districts throughout the state with declining enrollment, and the Esser Cliff, because that funding is no longer going to be here, along with other increasing workforce costs as well as inflation, are making it very challenging circumstances for us and others. So our enrollment decline was really precipitous, which puts us a little bit ahead with some of the districts in our area. We're going to work really hard to find positions in our district for people whose positions are eliminated. Last year, we were able to get positions for, I think, 95% or more of our staff find positions. We can't promise. This is the second year in a row of $20 million budget reduction. But we're going to work darn hard to make sure that we're able to find positions for those that have the qualifications, the background, and the desire to work in a different position. So that's that, and we'll be getting those reductions out publicly next week, and then we'll have a report for the board March 14th. Snow days, a superintendent's favorite conversation always is snow days. We had a very challenging snow situation on Wednesday in which there was very little snow, a little bit of a skiff of snow on the grass, but almost none, except for a couple maybe parking lots with just a tiny skiff. We were told, all the weather forecasters were predicting that weather would rise to 40 degrees, and looking out my window at about noon, I knew that was not going to be the case. And so we, given that it was an early release for elementary and that it's unsafe to also send students home prior to the end of the school day. So there was some consternation around that. I've had several emails from students and staff, and I've tried real hard to, and parents, and I've tried real hard to answer those questions with that explanation. And we have some dicey weather this week that could end up causing us to have late arrivals or early releases. So stay on bent knees around that. On a super positive note, just this Evergreen Awards it's so inspiring to see the wonderful employees that we have in the district. And as you know, I'm going out and doing individual one-on-one interviews with at least one student and one staff member in each building. And I'm constantly reminded of just the amazing employees and the amazing students that we have. It's no secret that it's tough in society right now in our community, and it's reflected in the schools. But I'll tell you what, we have people and students that are up for the challenge. So I'm very, very upbeat and hopeful. And hopefully I will never get the Care Bear stare from that was, I'm not sure what that is, but that doesn't sound, as a matter of fact, I think Carrie has given me that stare. And I've experienced saying something not so intelligent, and she just will make you feel like you're still the smartest person in the room. So kudos around that. So that's my report.
Thank you, John. All right, next up is policy development. We've got 4 policies that we need to take a quick look at this evening. This is our first reading for all 4. I'm going to turn this over to Director Perkins, who's going to walk us through these. Rob?
Thank you. The first policy we have to consider for first reading is board policy number 1400. Is that my screen? All right, I'm gonna make everything a little bit bigger for everybody. There we go. Policy 1400 exists, and WASDA has recommended that we rework some of the things about voting, and as we discussed in the workshop last night, we're adding a sentence declaring in policy that the agenda for these meetings will be on the district website 24 hours in advance of the published start time of the meeting. That's in addition to the policy. And then the change around our quorum rules and voting are placed in policy and better align with the law. 3 school board members constitute a quorum. Unless we do something and add more voting members, then we can go back and change the policy at that time. It adds the language for board members to remote in over Zoom or a conference call, which has been legal for a long time. You know, I've done it several times. And then points out that the voting method that we generally use is the voice vote, where we just say aye or nay. But that a board member can request a roll call vote, and that a roll call vote is required by law in a couple of situations. And it's laid out there. Conduct and order of business now includes some specific about our responsibilities or our rights and responsibilities around the agenda. Again, just aligns with the law. And that we can adopt a revised agenda if necessary before the meeting starts. I think, and then this section about public comment was greatly expanded. We were fortunate not to have the kinds of board meetings that surrounding districts and other districts around the nation had, where things got really hot and there was some disorder. This policy clarifies the things that are acceptable and unacceptable in public comment. And there's this nice bullet list that they prepared from statute and case law that goes beyond what we've been saying about, individual employees and things that are legal in nature, to include invasions of privacy, obscene or indecent pursuant to the Federal Communications Act, and some other things. Most notably, harassment and intimidation, which was common elsewhere and is now laid out in that list. It's not a complete list. And I invite the public to read it through. But the center of it is just to be clear about what is and is not acceptable under the law and under our policies for public comment. So that's 1400.
All right, thanks, Rob. Do we have any questions about board policy number 1400 from the board? A couple of the things, I know that's added in, but it's been pretty much our practice in a lot of those areas, like notifying 24 hours in advance. I mean, that's something that we've done.
Yeah, they've been published by WASDA as best practices, and I think the board
Has been following.
the board standards and things that Director Skelton helped develop, WASDA develop years ago, also has that kind of stuff in it.
Board standards.
Yeah. And so
All
it's a
right.
good clarification.
Any questions from the audience? Yeah. Come on up. Do we need the microphone up there?
Yep, there I am. Ooh.
Oh.
Phil Cornelish. The policy says that individuals who's not in the school district can make public comments. I mean, why would we? The problem is that
Can you show the spot he's referring
it
to?
becomes
I think so.
limited time to make comments, and when we allow other people from outside, it takes up the people within the district's moments to take those comments. I believe it's there somewhere, and it's like, you know, we really don't want people from the outside making comments. I mean, they have their own school boards to make comments to. Wouldn't that make sense? And because these meetings have often done that, I think they should consider that that's not really, or they should be placed after if there is available time and allow priority to those within the district.
I think I can speak to that a little bit.
You want to speak to that?
Yeah. The policy language comes from a requirement under the Open Public Meetings Act in the state of Washington that's been the law for 50 years. And the interpretations that have come from the Attorney General and some other legal experts say that the public includes everybody. And so they enjoy the right to attend and watch this meeting no matter who they are.
I understand what you're saying too, but it feels like over the years, the majority of the people who have come and given public testimony has been people within the district. There has been a couple of times where we've heard from someone else, but.
Well, like tonight, we're going to be going to La Center, and, you know, obviously we've thought about this. This is not something we should let the people in the center comment about. And, you know, the public does have their school districts to comment in. And, you know, that public, yeah, we understand everybody can come to a public meeting, but it kind of is a business between the board. In this case, I think the Attorney General's not realizing that, wait a minute, this is specific. I know he's trying to make his decision, but we're all making our determination, and it really is within this district and these policies within the people here.
The Public Meetings Act was pretty restrictive. It's very generous to give the public access, and it's been a best practice to just let anybody who signs up come and speak. It's limited to 3 minutes still, I think, in the policy. And
Yeah, and I think because sometimes if you, because it's what your affiliation is with the district is what we ask for, right? So if you could be a staff member that lives outside the district, and so you don't always have to be a citizen that lives within the district boundaries to be, in order to
Well,
speak.
I see
Yeah.
that problem too, but
Yeah.
okay. Thank you anyways.
Yeah.
Thanks for answering the question.
Thank you. All right, any other comments or questions on policy 1400? If not, then we got, it's been moved and seconded?
yes.
Yes? Yeah, that's what, yeah.
Director Bradford?
I thought, did we take a motion?
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to,
Yeah, we moved in second. As Director you moved, right? And Director Weatherspoon seconded.
No, I think
it was a little before?
it was before
Okay,
that.
then we will entertain a motion on this one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'll move for adoption of policy 1400, meeting conduct.
Seconded.
All right, moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll move this forward to a second reading at our next meeting. All right, next one is policy 1410, executive or closed sessions. Again, Director Perkins is going to walk us through this one.
So this one about executive closed sessions is also a modification of an existing policy. And what we learned in developing this is that there is another couple of categories under which the board can meet without the public there. The first one here is to discuss a data breach disclosure with legal counsel available. We never want to have our information taken or stolen or hacked into, but if that situation comes up, it is permitted under the new law that a discussion of the infrastructure and security of our networks can take place behind that closed door. Again, because, I guess, any member of the public can watch these, and we make the records as public as possible. So there was that one, and then we're inserting into the policy that the announced purpose of the executive session will be entered into the minutes of the meeting. That's also been our practice, but now it's in the policy explicitly, and people can hold us responsible for that. Those are the only two changes, and so with that, yeah. Any questions?
So yeah, the only change is the data breach reason, and then just outlining,
Yeah,
it's in the minutes.
yeah.
Okay. All right, any questions, board? Questions from the audience? All right, we'll entertain a motion.
Move adoption of these revisions to board policy number 1410 and advancement to second reading.
Second?
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next up is policy 1420, proposed agenda and consent agenda.
Let me make sure I've got, I think this is new policy, right? Yeah, okay. So this is new policy about who's responsible for making up the agenda. And it reflects our practice going back probably as many years as I've been on the board at least, is that we will be notified of the agenda and the materials 3 days in advance of the meeting, and citizens will be notified and have access to those same materials 24 hours prior to the meeting, including members of the press. It also describes our consent agenda process and what we can do if we want to actually have a discussion, because, you know, under the rules, a consent agenda, those items are assumed to be unanimously supported by the board. So that's the new policy. It reflects our practice.
All right,
And the proposal is to adopt it.
thanks. Any questions from the board on this one? Questions from the audience? All right, then let's entertain a motion for approval.
So moved. Advance policy 1420 to second reading, and
Do you need a second?
Yes, we need it. Thank you. All right, moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, last one, conflicts of interest, policy 1610.
see if I can get the one with the changes to it. All right. This is an existing policy, and there were some recommendations that the board in workshop actually, I felt there was a consensus that we not adopt one of the suggestions, which was to insert language in our conflicts of interest that would permit board members to work for the district on a contract basis up to a certain amount per month. It's long been our practice that we just stay away from that. The system is large enough and we can include more people that way in the work. So we are keeping a director or officer may not receive any compensation for services rendered to the district other than legally defined and authorized compensation for serving as a member of the board. That being the $50 per diem with the cap and the expenses that we might incur. The remainder of the language is the same as the old policies. The spouse of a director or officer may be employed as a substitute teacher, and if they're employed when you come on the board, they can remain employed, and board member would have to recuse themselves from decisions about that employee as a relative. Disclosures about certificated and classified employees are, substitutes and classified or certificated employees with the same stipulations that their contract that they have can be renewed year over year. And the terms have to be the same as all the other members of those bargaining groups. And if we've got a remote interest, like holding shares in a company that the district does business with, we've done this a lot over the years, is that we'll disclose that prior to board action, and it'll be recorded in the minutes. And I can remember directors doing that from my time over the last 9 years. We did some editing about cross-references just to make sure that the legal references and the cross-references were correct. So that section, vendor relations with vendors, is going to be removed since it's not relevant to the decision that we're making. And looks like that now. Happy to take some questions before we make a motion.
Questions for Rob on this one? The only question I have is, like, I feel like it was recommended changes because of a lot of the smaller districts throughout the state that run into some of these where people have to perform multiple positions.
Right. And the law would permit them to be the purchasing agent for the district or
Bus driver.
bus driver. Yeah.
Somebody's family
Hence
is a bus
the-
driver.
Oh dear. I was a little more nervous saying this than I thought I was going to be.
All right,
uh,
other questions from the board? Questions from the audience? Pretty standard language. All right, we'll entertain a motion for approval.
Move advancement of board policy number 1610 to second reading.
Second?
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, we'll move all 4 of those to our next meeting as a second reading. Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
All right, next up is our department update, teaching and learning and equity update. I think Dr. Williams is going to come up. Hello.
Hello. So we have 2 reports for you tonight. First, Ruth Beggs and I believe Nathan Lee is joining us. Yes.
Can you use the microphone, Dr. Williams? Can you grab the microphone there? Oh. Yeah, so the audience and.
Got you. Here I go. So I'll just say that again. We have 2 reports for you tonight. One is the follow-up from the book challenge. You told us to come back with what our plan is in terms of vetting materials and that kind of thing. So that'll be part 2 of our presentation tonight. But we wanted to follow up with the second part of our mid-year data review, where we're going to discuss where we are in terms of our math goal, and we're also going to provide you some information around where we are with reading, because of course we continue to press our curriculum and our teaching practices so that we can meet all students' needs when it comes to those. So our math goal remains 13%. We'll be looking through the lens of iReady as a tool tonight. We know that SBA, the state assessment, is also one of the tools that we'll be looking at when we're able to do that. And we will also look at some classroom level data that Nathan will be presenting with you tonight. So I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you tonight. Well, I'll tell you that for me, and I think for most people, we have a love-hate relationship with data. We love it if it says what we think it should say, and we hate it if we think it doesn't. But I'm here to tell you that data is information to be used. And so we're super excited to share with you our current reality. This data is going to answer some questions, but usually data brings up more questions. So we're going to just ground in our current reality and let you know kind of what's coming next. So if you take a look at, I'm going to grab the mouse here. There we go. Okay, so if you take a look at this scatter plot, what you're going to see is you will notice that, first of all, this is grades K through 8 represented here. It is iReady. Each of these dots represent a school, and it is both growth and performancy for math. So if you take a look at this quadrant, that's high performance, high growth. You can see we have 2 schools there. And if you take a look at, well, first of all, let me back up and say that the reason that this says, like, no, stop right there is because these 3 dots represent just a few kids that are taking, middle school kids that are taking high school classes. So those are high schools and just a couple of kids. But what we want you to know is, as you can see, that this is the low performance, low growth, and this is right now where most of our schools are falling. But the amazing thing is if you dig into each of those schools, there are a lot of bright spots. So what we spent our last leadership gathering doing with all of our leaders is they took a look at their schools, and they dug down. What's happening by grade level, what's happening by class, what's happening by teacher, and then they identified bright spots, and every single school had quite a lot of bright spots. And then we started thinking about, okay, we have some good things happening. Where can we leverage the good things that are happening? So that's kind of what we did. That is what we did at our last gathering. Whoops, that's not. Okay, so this is our next slide, and what I wanted to show you is this basically, if you take a look at the vertical column on the left, what iReady does is they identify placements of students when they take the test. And so kids will either place mid or above grade level, early on grade level, 1 grade level below, 2 grade levels below, or 3 or more grade levels below. Now, if you look across, you'll see the grade levels. On the very bottom, you'll see that key where it says dark blue means they made more than 50% growth. If it's more than 50% growth, that means that's considered high growth or on track. 1 year's growth is 100%. So at this point of the year, you would want to be at least 50% growth. So take a look, see where you see the dark blue, and we can see that we have a strength in terms of helping our students who are, or supporting our students who are 3 or more grade levels below to make sure that they are achieving. You can see where we have the light, and those are our challenges. Okay, now in terms of relative placements, if you look at this column, or this chart, what you're going to notice is it compares relative placements and growth by race and ethnicity. So if you take a look at the orange or yellow vertical line there, you can see that 10% of our students are mid or above grade level right now in math. And then if you take your eye and go down, then that compares and you can see how students are doing by group. Same thing with growth. We would want to be at least 50% right now because that would be halfway through the year of growth. You can see that overall we have a median of 46% overall. And once again, if you draw your eye down, you can see how our groups are doing.
Good evening, I'm Nathan Lee. I had the opportunity to join you in the fall to talk about some data collection tool for our elementary, where we are gathering unit assessments and unit math assessments as well as reading assessments to give not only the iReady data and the Smarter Balance data, but also our unit assessment measures disaggregated by race and give staff the chance to look at that disaggregated data faster. And so what we have almost all of our elementary buildings using this tool. And so we have a sample of how the math units are being input. So we're using a common scoring rubric from illustrative math K5, where we're using the scoring rubric. It is then converting to a percentage and looking at our students who have met or exceeded the Common Core standards assessed in each unit, and the yellow being approaching and the red being emerging. And from there, as staff enter the data like a gradebook, it then automatically disaggregates by race and is indicating, looking at percentages, how many students scored those percentage, and that's another view. So like that graph that Ruth just showed in iReady, where we can kind of see a measure of how our groups of students are performing across our building, across our PLC, and what are we noticing? Are there changes we need to make to support our students within our daily instruction? And so again, we're really trying to emphasize our students' experience on a day-to-day basis. and then also providing a breakdown by proficiency in each unit. And so these are all sample SNPs from a buildings tool to show you what each grade level is seeing as they are entering data for each of our math units. Then, as an example, looking at Smarter Balance, we backed up to 2015 to give you an indicator of where we have been, where we currently are, and where we continue to go. Now, in reading, this scatter plot is much like Ruth just shared in terms of the high performance. You can see in reading, we're toward the low performance, high growth overall. This is also our third year of our Faunus and Pinnell reading adoption. So we've had a couple of years experience. With the program, the materials and the support, students have also had consistent vocabulary being used within the curriculum over time. So we are starting to see that growth and that change for our students. Again, our overall progress toward 100% or 1 year's worth of growth. Reading, we have quite a bit more students exceeding that 50% mark at our halfway point, which is definitely a celebration. Our overall median is at 60% in reading right now for K-8 in reading. And you can also tell by race how each of our groups are performing in alignment. For reading, the short-term measures, this is the same data sheet as the math. So for our Faunus and Pinnell guided reading benchmark, we are giving the benchmark assessments 3 times per year, fall, winter, and spring. So buildings are just completing the winter reading benchmark for our elementary students currently. And so you can see in the fall, students' initial reading level is indicated, and then the winter, it's tracking how many intervals of growth they've gone up, as well as based on how many intervals they need to go up by for winter and then into spring. That disaggregated data appears as well so that we can see what the student experience looks like by group. And then also growth and proficiency, the number of students across a single grade level meeting or exceeding the expected reading benchmark, as well as the number of students who have met or exceeded the expected levels of growth. In our Smarter Balance trends, where we've come from. That'll bring us to the next part. Thank you.
Okay, the moment of truth. So where are we in relation to the goal we set? First, I want to tell you that I'm really excited that in this first year of redoing everything that we set a big goal. I'm excited about that. That in itself, I think, is super awesome. And what we've been doing really is setting up a lot of structures to be able to monitor the goal and think about the system with which we need to build so that people can do what they need to do and we can do what's best for kids. The goal, once again, is right there. Evergreen Public Schools will increase student proficiency in every student category by 13% over last year, as measured by spring Smarter Balanced assessments and spring iReady diagnostics. There are a lot of numbers on this page. I'm going to walk you through kind of making sense of it. basically, what I want to tell you is this blue here is last year. iReady scores, okay? Proficiency scores. The green is this year so far. The purple is our spring 23 goal, okay? So if you think about, so if you look at the row 1 right here, and you look at the spring 22 proficiency, I just added 13%, and 49% is the overall goal for iReady, not for SBA, for iReady, because iReady includes, you know, we have K through 10 here, because when you get to 11 and 12, it's, there are different rules about taking iReady. But K through 12 is included in that. But because K through 2 do not take SBA, the goals look different for SBA and iReady. Does that make sense? Okay. So as we look across here, what we can also see is, as we look vertically, you can see that from winter to winter, what we've done is taken a look, okay, where are we so far? You can see that overall, we are down 1 percentage point. The other thing to note is that, you know, from winter to spring in general, there's a little bit of a bigger jump than there is fall to winter. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases. So the one thing that we did notice that was in 4th grade, they had 22% winter 22, been increased by 17% to 39%. So, and right now we're up from 22% winter to winter to 30%, which is an 8% increase already. So I think we're going to make it in 4th grade. I'm excited about that. So there's a celebration right there. The other thing that iReady does for us, first of all, they have done a lot of norming and studying, and what they have found is there's a 0.8 correlation between passing, being proficient on iReady, and being proficient on SBA. And so this the very top one here, shows that if students achieve grade level or 1 year's growth on iReady, then they're projecting that we'll have a 29% proficient on SBA in math. Last year it was 25. So it should be an increase, not 13%, but it should be an increase. Now what we want to really do is we want kids to achieve more than 1 year's growth. And we call that stretch growth, or iReady calls that stretch growth. And what stretch growth is, the definition of stretch growth is really putting kids on a path to proficiency. So they're growing more than 1 year. And so if we were to do that for all of our kids, we would see 36% this year. And the thing is if you put kids on a path to higher growth, then they don't make proficiency usually in 1 year, depending on how far behind they are, but eventually they're going to get to that proficient point. So that's what we really want to do. And to do that, what we're thinking about is really strengthening core instruction. You've heard that before. All of our principals are talking about that. That's why we have the new math curriculum. We really want to strengthen our core curriculum. This is reading. I won't go show you a lot, except for just to simply say that, you know, nationally, reading, kids are way stronger in reading than they are in math. That holds true here in Evergreen, and you can see it here. We don't have an official goal, but I threw that on there just so that you can see it. If you would like to dive deeper into it later, you're welcome to. And once again, if all students made 1 year's growth, we would be at 44% proficient on SBA. If they make stretch growth, 52%.
Thank you. And I just want to thank this team. First of all, they have done so much work in terms of trying to provide our staff with the tools they need so they can keep an eye on how well students are doing. So you see that with the tools that Nathan has built, the structure that Ruth is supporting with the school improvement process. And And as you were watching, you see we have quite the lift. We have quite a number of students who have entered this school year 2 and 3 grade levels behind. And we have our standard growth, but our administrators, even though Ruth challenged all of us to really look in the data for the bright spots, and they were able to find them. But because, they care continuously and deeply about each of our students, they were not satisfied because they know that we have an education debt. We're not going to be satisfied until each and every one of our students are meeting and ideally exceeding grade level standards. So before I close, I just want to remind you of a quote I read to you in the fall when we came to present our plans. And this is by Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, and she talks about the education debt. When we think of what we are combating as an achievement gap, we implicitly place the onus for closing that gap on the students, their families, and their individual teachers and schools. But the notion of education debt requires us to think about how all of us, as members of a democratic society, are implicated in creating these achievement disparities. And I just wanted to remind us of that and bring that forward, because we will continue to work on ways that we can make deposits into our students' education accounts, because this is what we owe them. So when we look, we see some of the successes that Ruth highlighted. 4th grade is on track to meet the 13% proficiency goal. We do have positive growth trends in some of our grade levels. We want them in more of those grade levels. What we were talking with John about this presentation, and we're just going to, continue to try to be transparent and tell the Ruth truth. We've been calling it. I usually say call the baby ugly, but it might be more appropriate to say the Ruth truth. But we want to continue on the trajectory of trying to find the strategies and tips that are really working in our school and scale them so that we can help more of our staff and students. And a success and a challenge is this, that this is the first year of our new math adoption for elementary. And it's also a year where we're revisiting what we're doing at secondary with mathematics, because they've adopted curriculum a few years ago. And it brought this to mind when we were preparing for this presentation. And I know you can read, but I want to read it to you and pause and make some comments along the way. It says, in leading in a culture of change, Fullen writes that the implementation dip is literally a dip in performance and confidence as one encounters an innovation that requires new skills and new understandings. So what's really exciting is we have a brand new curriculum that is that works to make math accessible to all students. And surprisingly, as John has indicated in some of his empathy interviews, I've had the pleasure of sitting in with various instructional teams as they are visiting and designing lessons for math classes, hearing more and more, especially at the elementary level, that students are liking math, which is really exciting. And there are also spaces, because when you're dealing with new implementation, this is different than students have learned math traditionally in some of our settings. You also hear some of the tug of how rigorous this work is, and we want to lean into that. How can we help our students, teachers reach higher level in terms of their teaching and students in terms of learning? So we know with implementation, we're just going to have this bit of a dip potentially in some of our spots. And so Fullen talks about this implementation dip, and we surprisingly, even with the data that Ruth is showing, we're not experiencing a significant dip. And we are not experiencing also the growth at the rate that we would like to see, but we are on pace and on target in some of those levels to meet some of the goals that the goal that we have. All innovations worth their salt call upon people to question and, in some respects, to change their behavior and their beliefs even in cases where innovations are pursued voluntarily. So when we are trying this new material out and watching our teachers and our leaders learn more, again, they tried it on, our principals actually taught some of these lessons, and they are learning just how powerful this curriculum is once we really apply implement it as intended. So just want to give you a little bit about where we are just in the science of education and in the science of implementing something. There'll be some challenges along the way. So what are our next steps? So we will continue to monitor and support the use of our curriculum so that it is implemented with fidelity in elementary. And I know this is John's favorite topic, but speaking of snow days, we had a principal emailed us just before the meeting. One of the prompts was, is it good or bad? Do you like snow days or don't you like snow days? And so for the students who said they didn't like snow days, they said, we don't get to come to school and we don't get to learn math, because they're starting to enjoy that content area more, like I was saying earlier. So it was really fun to see that. But we're going to continue to support the use of illustrative mathematics, re-engaging our secondary staff with illustrative math, because we've had various curriculum implemented at the secondary level. And so we just made it very clear to them that we're going to align the curriculum that we are using at secondary so that we can align our support to you. So algebra teachers are getting together. I just saw algebra teachers at Mountain View High School collaborating on algebra assignments that they all gave, and they were comparing notes on what was working for students and what wasn't, just getting that taste of what it means to really calibrate on what good instruction in mathematics looks like. So more of that will continue. And then our continued focus on evidence-based instructional practices. It was just so good to see Carrie up here, because again, she is a light and just kind of emblematic of the work that we're trying to do with instruction across our system. So these are our next steps, and we'll entertain any comments or questions you have at this time.
Anybody have any questions?
Can I come back to that first graph of grade level growth and proficiency in math with you? When we're talking about proficiency for a student, is that based on the grade level standards? A student entering in third grade and being placed a grade level behind would need to make all the progress from where they are to that proficiency in order.
Yes, which is why they combine both growth and proficiency, to acknowledge that we entered with the very low pencil. We had our math scores were in that bottom quadrant when we entered the school year, and to see them scooching up, meaning that they're making almost 50% growth in some instances. You see some below and you see some above, but acknowledging they're growing and then they're trying to move to the right toward proficiency. So moving toward the right means you are moving closer to grade level standards. But the moving up indicates that you are actually growing and making progress as you've entered the school year.
And so district-wide, all of the dots would be clustered around 20 at 0?
Yeah, right. If we didn't have the growth factor.
Okay. What does the focus look like for a student who is way behind, like 3 grade levels behind? Well, we're defining a district-wide metric of 13% absolute growth in proficiency at grade level. But for that student who's so far behind, what constitutes a success?
That's a very good question. I think we could talk about a little bit in terms of iReady. They set stretch growth goals. So if so you saw the slide. I'll try to, and I might need to lean on my experts here to help me out. But give me 2 seconds to get to one of those growth, there it is, well, yeah. So you see, if a student is making typical growth, this is where we would be in terms of our proficiency level. But down here at the bottom, we're going to need more of those students to make, 2 and 3 grade levels above. And so when they're in iReady, the test indicates what a stretch goal would be for that particular student for them to head towards grade level. And I don't know if it's always in the year or within a couple years.
Yeah, depending on how far behind the student is, a growth goal could get them to proficiency within 1 year. If they're, 3 or more years behind, it's going to take longer, but it's generally within, 1 or 2 years.
Okay. And what was the date of the placement? Was that early in the year? Was that like a formative assessment?
So we've taken, Rob, I'm not sure I completely understand your question, but iReady was taken fall, winter, and then will be taken again in spring. Mm-hmm. And so from fall to winter is how they calculate the growth, and the growth is calculated through the median, so the middle student.
Mm-hmm. Well, my question, if you go to the, how much did growth vary across placement levels? If you go to that one with all of the blue squares.
That one's for reading, but.
Yeah, either one. I'm just trying to interpret it right. One more. Yeah. The descriptions on the left are the placements. When was that determined?
Oh, yeah. So the placements are fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at a student 2 grade levels below and the bar is blue,
That means they're making growth.
they're making significant
50%
growth.
of growth?
Yeah, either 50 or more. So equal to 50 or more is the dark blue. So
Is that a student who's demonstrating the current level grade standards?
well, like we were saying, if they're 3 or more grade levels below, they would need to make more than 1 year's growth in order to, get toward proficiency. Your question again, Rob.
When we look at that blue square, would that mean the student started 3 or more grade levels below and now they're 50% of the way to the next grade level placement?
No, what it means is, so this is this is talking about typical growth, and typical growth is 1 year's growth would be 100%.
Okay.
And so that means that all of the students in the dark blue have made at least 50% growth, or more.
And that's from the placement baseline?
From the placement baseline, yes.
Okay, thank you. It's a 4-dimensional graph, really, and
You're wondering if those 3 or more grade level below and the dark blue are at grade level now because they're dark blue?
that's pretty much it, yeah.
Right, and so we would have to dig a little deeper. We know that they've grown at least 50%, but we don't know if that means that they're at grade level. We'd have to dig deeper to see that.
Thank you. Yeah, that helps me read the graphs. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to get set up for our book challenge update. So I'll need to switch out here.
I love that, just hearing Ruth Truth a minute ago. It made me chuckle, so that's great. Well, good evening again. Mike and I, and Ryan too, Ryan's back there, we're here to talk about our plan, as Dr. Williams stated earlier, to address the board's decision regarding the challenge of book 47. So this plan is designed to help teachers with creating the conditions for academic conversations about sensitive topics. So at this time, and I think we had mentioned this to you earlier, that the book is available right now still in the school libraries, like the big library in the school. So it has been removed at this point from seventh grade. So by spring of 2024, we hope to have enacted a plan that allows us to bring the book back to the seventh grade choice libraries as per board decision. So we want to be able to share the plan with you tonight so that you feel comfortable with that. So we also want to acknowledge, we hear you as a board that you do not want to ban books, you don't want to restrict them. Therefore, we are proposing some actions that are in alignment with our district policies regarding teaching sensitive topics. So we're confident that we can still use this book instructionally next year with the appropriate professional development through existing PD structures then starting in the spring. So we're but we are doing in the spring in some of our structures, we're actually going to be providing PD to our teachers, and then in August, some more PD for teachers as we move into the school year. So I just want to do a little bit of storytelling here around our ELA timeline. So if you take a look at the screen, I'm just going to pause for a moment and just kind of have you read through from 2008 up till now. So I'll pause for a moment. As you can see at the top, we had a humanities class. It was 90 minutes, and it included social studies and ELA. It was called humanities. And then, as you can see, going through the years, it changed. You know about the change to a 6-period day. So with that change came 60-minute ELA. So they separated. So social studies and ELA did separate. Then. So if you take a look at this in this journey, I just want to note that we did not have a core reading curriculum. We did not have a consistent time allocated for ELA separate from social studies. So that's what I had just mentioned to you. It was a combined class. It was called Humanities that focused on integrated units of study and disciplinary literacy. So as a system, we prepared for an ELA class with an adoption process pre-pandemic. So as you can imagine, you know what happened, right? Little did we know that lift would be required, that huge lift would be required with the pandemic happening. So that's a little bit of what happened over the years from 2008 until 2022. So I'm going to have Mike come up here and speak a little bit to why the reading units of study.
Thanks, Tilly. Good evening. I think it was about 3 years ago that I talked with most of you on a Zoom about this, because that was the state of the world that we lived in, and we discussed this question. As Tilly mentioned, what was exciting and what still is exciting about this curriculum is it gives kids access to hundreds of titles of books that are not your typical canonical books that maybe we studied when we were in school. The really foundation of this adoption was around the classroom libraries and the book club books and the diversity of authors, the diversity of lived experiences that kids could encounter through that literature. And so as we went through the adoption process, the teachers quickly gravitated toward this idea of what if we actually had books to teach our children with? It was a pretty novel concept at middle school. As a former middle school teacher, I remember grabbing whatever I could, using Scholastic, Money Saver, coupon, all the things to get books in your classroom, whereas here we had an opportunity to bring before the board 3 years ago, every classroom having access to 300, 400, 500, 600 different titles. So it's a big process, and I think one of the things I wanted to emphasize today was in going through the adoption process and going with the units of study, we were also partnering with experts who had vetted this entire library. So those experts included literacy consultants and teachers and community members who worked with Columbia University and the Teacher College to create and curate these collections. It's a big job to do on your own, and in my role, I've supported in the past buildings, high schools, middle schools, with selecting books and spending some money to try and build small libraries. And it takes a lot of collaborative effort to think about, well, what books are appropriate? What books should we use? What books do our kids need to have in their English classes? So through this process, we were actually able to use an already curated set of materials. And the challenge comes with no teacher can know every single book. I mean, that's just the state of things. But the curriculum itself provides guidelines around how to create safe spaces in our classrooms for kids to have conversations about other lived experiences, to have conversations about books by authors of color, authors who represent genders and identities that maybe kids can now finally see in themselves, or maybe, when we think about a windows and mirrors approach, identities that they have not had many experiences with. The curriculum itself creates those opportunities if the teachers are learning it and following it to really allow our kids to become critical thinkers about other lived experiences. And I think that's one of the most important parts about the units of study and the classroom libraries. Now, as Tilly mentioned, we had some barriers with professional development when we first adopted because we literally could not do any. So there was a plan to provide every teacher with release time to learn the units of study, to understand the intent of the curriculum, to understand how to implement those classroom practices, to understand how to really create teaching on a bedrock of choice, because I think that's super critical. Our kids have choices now on what they can read. Our families have choices. Our parents have choices about what their kids bring home and read. And if those choices aren't in alignment with their values or what they believe is important or appropriate for their student, there are other choices that we can make. And so I think Tilly will talk a little bit about how our plan for professional development really underscores the expectations around how we communicate and partner with our families around the texts that are in our classrooms. And I think just as a last point, this curriculum really leans into justice-based education, which requires us to have critical conversations with our kids around injustice in this world, and oppression and marginalization, and how members of our community, members of our student bodies are facing these social issues every single day. So that's just kind of the why behind it. It's not going to solve all of the things, but I think of all of the options that we looked at when we went through the adoption process, the idea of having a classroom library that allowed us to teach in the direction of justice-based education was super important.
So I just want to kind of reemphasize and talk about how this curriculum that we have, it supports developing critical thinkers and understanding multiple perspectives. So the next few slides I'm going to run through, they show our philosophy around the why. So as Mike mentioned, we have it's called the units of study within our curriculum. So choice is critical. Mike mentioned that, it's critical. Not all texts are appropriate in terms of reading level, interest, cultural, linguistic background, and beliefs for groups of students who are the same age. So therefore, choice is built in practice, and it is outlined in our Common Core Standards for Literacy. So it's really important that we really focus on that. Choice is critical. Also, forcing all students to read the same book or denying all students the choice of a book fails to honor the lived experiences of our community. Mike mentioned that earlier. Classroom libraries with hundreds of titles were purchased to help end these practices so they could have the choice. Studying literature helps students understand themselves and the world around them. So should Students should experience other perspectives. We talked about multiple perspectives. Windows, we call those windows, as well as see their own identities reflected in the stories that they read. And those are called mirrors. So we talk about windows and mirrors. So that's what this curriculum provides. Okay, having problems turning my page. Literature also, it allows for the study of themes related to sensitive topics students experience in their lives every day. So you think about kids walking around the halls of any of our schools, right? Themes of power, identity, which include gender and race, through academic conversations about the impact of racism, of bigotry, and other forms of discrimination that lead to conflicts affecting our students and community. Also, I want to mention that studying literature helps develop empathy. So that's one of the main things we want to focus on too. So we want that understanding and the compassion in our students. We live in a world of nuance and complexity. And so again, using this curriculum, providing PD for teachers to create those conditions, that environment is very important. So again, why the units of study? Our goal is developing informed citizens. That's what we want. Informed citizens who can work toward a more equitable society. We can't insulate students from the critical issues in their community, but we can partner with the parents to prepare students for the world outside their classroom. Mike mentioned that earlier. It's so important to be able to partner with them, communicate with them, let them know what we are using in our classrooms, and also maybe providing we do have structures within back to school nights, curriculum nights, so being able to communicate that. These are the books that we're using. These are the units of study we have. Sensitive topics that might trigger, traumatize, should be handled respectfully through proactive communication with students and families, and responsive instruction where alternatives are available. So again, we need to think about our students and our families and provide alternatives. That's about that communication again. It is impossible to predict how students will respond to certain topics. Thus again, choice is offered, rather than denying all or some students access to a book or critical issue. I'm missing a part of my slide deck. Okay, so let me talk to you a little bit. I'll kind of wing it here without you seeing it. So what I had on one of the slides is I wanted to talk about the equity lens, our EPS equity lens. So we want to make sure that we have some changing actions that occur as we're looking at our curriculum and how we implement. So implementing the units of study under such extreme conditions illuminated the need for us to use our EPS equity lens. Revisiting this journey through this lens, our team has delineated the following actions that we need to change. So thinking about middle school ELA right now, that's the issue, that's the first issue. We're gonna break it off into some chunks here and start with middle school ELA. We're gonna provide professional development around topics embedded in professional learning. So we're gonna use job alikes, like I said before. That's gonna be a structure that we use to provide PD to our teachers And we're also going to use August PD days. When teachers return in August, we're going to use some time there also to have professional development. We're going to have support for teachers and principals with ways to communicate about the topics in the units of study. And it's aligned books. So we have, and I wanted to be able to show you a slide deck, and maybe you'll see this later, but we actually do have work started where teachers they've created slide decks where they have books, and a synopsis of that book, and it talks about what that book is about. So I will make sure that you get that so that you can see that and look through it. But teachers have already begun that work, and so that's a part of what we're moving forward with. Okay. All right, and curating professional learning that helps teachers further understand the intent and design of the curriculum. So it's really important. So we talked about communication with parents. There it is. Okay, so the final bullet point there, curating professional learning that helps teachers further understand the intent and design of the curriculum. So we talked about communication and also implementing the curriculum as designed. It's really important because those units provide context and support for academic and critical conversations. So really following that curriculum as it was designed. And also, I wanted to mention ongoing, if you see they're curating professional learning that helps teachers understand the intent. So further ongoing supporting conversations. It's about the PD that we provide. So we have, for example, work that we've been doing right now. We have been consulting with Lanny Ball. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he has done PD around book clubs for us and how to have book club conversations around sensitive topics. He's provided that PD to our teachers, and that is ongoing. That is this year. So I'm going to hand it over to Mike. Is there anything else, Mike, that you wanted to add to this?
Oh, yeah, you can see an example. This is something that was done at a couple of our schools actually about 1.5 years ago. So as I mentioned earlier, the challenge of teachers knowing enough about each book to be able to kind of pique the interest of kids is always there, and they work really hard to come up with really innovative ideas for doing that. So this is one idea. There are some curated book trailers that you may have seen or heard about on YouTube that are real short, like movie trailers that are about 1 minute long. And so there's book tastings that they do where they spread the books out and they talk a little bit about each one. I think another critical thing to mention is we also want to partner with our teacher librarians who have just a wealth of knowledge about books and how to support kids in choosing and abandoning books and having those critical conversations. So that's another part of our plan, is really to bring our teacher librarians into the fold and talk with them about, how do we support teachers when it can be overwhelming, especially think of a new teacher who has suddenly access to 500 books that they've never read. How do we support that teacher in helping their kids make choices that are going to be supportive of their learning and are going to be in alignment with their own interests and passions and values? So that's just one example of what that looks like. So any questions or follow-up?
I was curious, what is a job like?
Great question. So we have, throughout the year, early release days at secondary. It's about 2.5 hours where it's bargained whether they're district directed, so a content specialist like myself or math specialist can design professional development for groups of our content teachers. And so we have, basically we had 5 in a row starting in January, once a month, where we would have 2 hours to pull teachers and do professional development. So that's one structure that we have available to where teachers, it's part of their workday to come and receive professional development. That, as you know, is a challenge. If we don't have access to them during the workday, it's hard to ensure that they're receiving the professional development. Is really critical and important. But that's basically what that is.
Any other questions? I want to say that I do appreciate this, and I know, and I like the idea that we have a variety of books available to kids for them to read, because if they're interested in something, they got to read it, right? That's what helps those scores in reading go up. If we're reading books that, interest us, then we can learn more about the world that we live in. So tools that we can give our teachers, I think, is really helpful, and information too to our parents, that they have a quick reference so they can see what the books are about.
Thank you. And I do want to say that I know a lot of our teachers, they have practices in place at the beginning of the year to communicate what they're doing in their classrooms, and that, even going back a million years when I was an 8th grade teacher, I would communicate to my parents about, you, the parent, are the final arbiter of what your child reads, so please have conversations with them about what they're reading and what they're interested in, and then keep a two-way communication going with me about, is this meeting your child's needs? And if it isn't, I will find something that will. That's my job. And so I think for us to clarify that as an expectation, it's a best practice, but it's something that we should all be engaged in to make sure that we're meeting our kids' needs and that we're not out of alignment with our families and our community.
All right, any other comments or questions? Thank you. Oh. All right, next up is the good news report. Hello, Craig.
All right, while we're setting that up, I do thank you. Always love being here to present the good news to the board and Superintendent Boyd. I want to mention that Read Across America Week is actually happening in person again this week, which it's been not able to do that for a couple of years. So I've been lucky the last 2 days to go out to schools in the morning, our elementary schools, and Beaches is back and presenting a breakfast, and the foundation have all first graders are getting a book. So it's really cool to have that back. I'm going to start the good news report with, of course, February is Black History Month, and our schools have been celebrating in many different ways. I have some highlights here. I was lucky enough to go to Evergreen High School's Black History Month assembly. Their Black Student Union put this on. It was really informative, and I think the students got a lot out of it. A great guest speaker in Margaret Carter, who was there, who's the first Black woman elected to the state of Oregon's legislature. She spoke to the students and really connected. That was a great experience. Gila Marion also had some great events this month. I want to highlight Hollingsworth Academy. Every Friday they have a little get-together where all the students and staff meet to have celebrations and share shout-outs. And on one of their Fridays, some of their students who had created displays and done research on and studying about Black Americans and their impacts on American history, they shared their work with the entire school. So that was a really great experience. And now Illahee, this month, they did art projects and talked and discussed as a school about the Lunar New Year, the Chinese New Year. So really cool display at Illahee. I want to make sure that we highlight this story about the Teaching Academy. Superintendent Boyd has been attending these classes with students at our high schools that are looking as education as a possible career. And in these Teaching Academy, students, when they go through it at the end of the year, seniors are able to take the paraeducator exam, which our district will pay for. And if they pass it, they're guaranteed to have an interview for a paraeducator job within our district. And also, the real goal is to be able to have our own students return to our districts in education jobs. And this includes if they go on to get a teaching degree and they're qualified, they're also guaranteed to have an interview with the district for teaching positions that they're qualified for. So we know that there are jobs right now that are hard to fill, like paraeducator positions. So this is one way that we can have our students stay within the district and also there's a emphasis on making sure that these classes are available to all our students so that eventually we could diversify our staff to better represent our student body. I love this, at Orchards Elementary School, Silver Star, and Sunset Elementary School, the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra came and played for the students, who had adults playing for the kids. And the reason why it's really cool is because two of our staff members, Bruce Dunn and Scott Winks, are band directors for our school, so they got to perform for the students. So a little bit of, turning the tables there for them. I want to get down to Burton, where we mentioned this, that some of the board members attended the At Your Service at Burton. So as I promised, there are pictures and celebrations of this. Thank you to Chartwells for hosting this and also sharing these pictures. Dr. Williams was also there. And I always love talking about when our students are helping other students. And this month, Union High School, there's their Superintendent Boyd trying to blow up a balloon. I think he needed help from students, probably the elementary school students. But Union High School students do this all across our district, and for many years now, they go and teach STEM to our elementary school students, and this is at Burnt Bridge Creek Elementary School, and I love these pictures of our students helping students learn STEM. And then finally, I want to share our wonderful team, Mountain View High School Science Bowl team. This crew of youngsters won a regional tournament at the University of Portland, and that earned them a trip to the national tournament in Washington, D.C., which is paid for. And I do want to highlight the team captain, Eric Zahn. He correctly answered 44 questions in the morning rounds. And typically a student answers only about 4 to 8 questions correctly in these rounds, and he did 44 to help lead his team to victory. So congratulations to them. We're going to be doing a future story, a video story on them as well, but they're off to Washington, D.C. So thank you very much.
Congratulations, Jackie. I see
Yeah.
your sign up there.
Thank you, Craig. Oh.
Nobody can tell.
All right, next up is informational item only. It's the financial statement through January 31st, 2023. It's for the board's information. We've all received a copy. Next on the agenda is board comments, comments by the school board. Anybody have anything that they would like to bring up? Victoria, do you have anything?
Well, John already mentioned we were at the Legislative Assembly and then met with some of our legislative leaders. It was really interesting. It's a tough year for education, I'm not going to lie. And they had us stay very focused on 2 items, special ed funding and transportation funding, because they take big chunks out of our budget, and it's still pretty sketchy. I felt like nobody seemed to have any definitive promises to give us about either one of them, but we definitely pleaded our case as to why it's important. I have to give some props to Rob, because his wonderful program that he invented really was quite the cause célèbre by at the legislative conference. It was helpful to the legislators, it was helpful to other district board members, and so congratulations on a job well done on that, Rob.
Thank you, Vic.
One of the tasks that I personally had in mind that we all kind of embraced while we were there was making sure that as we meet with our legislators that we invite them to come back to our school district and to be witness to some of the incredible things that we have in our district. And they were all very, very responsive to coming out. So I'll work with Lori and I'll work on that, trying to set some things up with them when they come out of session. Because we have a good story to tell, and I'm excited to share that information with these folks. So And then Jackie and I were at the core team. I always get the words twisted around. Core planning team for the strategic plan. And that was a great day of work, afternoon of work, and the plan is moving forward, and I'm excited. What was exciting for me as a board member, well, two things, was one, just seeing progress and really having it be so intentional and with so much detail. And then it also, as a board member, it was exciting that I actually felt like I knew all of the, most of the things they were talking about. There were things in my mind that I was like, I wonder if this would be a good, and then I'm hearing it, so it validated that what we talk about kind of is interfacing with what the work is out there, and that we're just right on top of what's happening and what's going on. So I really enjoy that. And the participation was a lot of fun, and I've been getting to know more and more of the staff, and it's been good. A very good experience from my perspective. That's all I want to add tonight.
So I agree. The strategic planning process and participating in it has been a really good experience. And meeting Dr. Campbell and seeing how she focuses us on kids. I've said it before, but it's worth saying again. It's the best process I've seen in Evergreen for that kind of work that just makes me happy. So yeah, I was at the legislative conference, and I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the pieces that came up. So we had a great keynote by, help me with this name. Shankar Venantam, who produces podcasts about the brain and reactions in the brain. He had so much wisdom to share about how people react and respond to changes and to frustrations and to happiness. It was really holistic, and I enjoyed that. I want to point out, because I know we've had folks come to the board meeting and talk about the role of parents quite stridently. When they displayed the interviews that they had with senators and the representatives who agreed to the conference, to speak at the conference, that Senator Wellman's office, she talked about responding to those assertions of parents' rights and those claims by going out and finding them and putting them in one place. And I have a copy of the K-12 Parents' Bill of Rights that she was talking about on my machine finally that looks really good. It's got all the subjects, and I anticipated it'd be a really good resource for us to pass on with our thanks to her. I was just so impressed to see someone of her stature respond to that advocacy in such a constructive and responsive way. She wants government to work for everybody. Is the impression that I got from that. And the rest of you have said it all about Ledge Conference.
I just wanted to quickly mention, last Tuesday I attended the first unified basketball team game at Chehalis Middle School, and the stands were packed, and it was amazing. The students in the community that came out to help and support the students who were on the basketball team, they had leadership students and basketball students, work with students, and what it says is, Unified Sports joins people with and without intellectual disabilities on the same team. And it was just one of the best basketball games I've attended, and I've attended a lot, like ever. And just the amount of excitement and just community in the gym that day was pretty amazing. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jackie. Yeah, that is fun. I've been able to go to some of the soccer games that they've had in the past, and it's a lot of fun to see all those kids participating. All right. Anything else from anyone? All right, next up is future agenda items. Do we have anything we'd like to add? No? Okay, then we will go ahead and move on to public comments. At this time, any community member wishing to address the board may do so during the designated time on the agenda for public comments, as long as the comments are not personnel related or about an individual employee or student and are not legal in nature. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes to address the board. Comments are to be directed at the Board of Directors as a whole and may not be addressed to any individual member of the board or administrative staff or the audience. Please state your name and district affiliation. Signed up this evening is Scott Kelty. Hi, Scott.
First time using a microphone, so thank you all. I have some notes here on my cell phone because this is kind of a personal topic, and I know I have 3 minutes. I'm going to do my best here. First off, Scott Kilty, I'm a fellow educator. I'm a special education teacher at a neighboring district. I'm a parent of a child with type 1 diabetes. She is 7 years old. She attends BBC elementary school. For those of you that don't know about type 1 diabetes, it's an autoimmune disease. It is there for life. It doesn't go away. In 2019, there were 244,000 children under the age of 20 that were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. See that timer, man, that's intense. I just want to say, like, technology is amazing. We all use it every day. We're not using it the best we can in our schools. My daughter has 2 pieces of technology she uses, and it's not monitored by the school district or employees at the school district. We have capabilities. I can view my daughter's blood sugar right now as I stand here, but we do not allow our school nurses to do so. Oftentimes, this district is fantastic. They do provide nutritional information we can see as parents and work through that in terms of planning food, but it's often wrong. And there are shortages, and we know how that goes. There are shortages of food, and it makes it difficult for us to plan our daughter's meals at school. And oftentimes, is added stress to my daughter, who is 7. It's said that people with diabetes make over 300 additional decisions in their day related to their type 1 diabetes. My 7-year-old does that. Today was one of those days. So I guess I have 1 minute. I urge that we look into technology, we arm our schools with nurses, a nurse at every school. Nurses are throughout several schools, is my understanding, and we give them the technology to monitor the children who have these needs. And I urge the board and the district to reach out to stakeholders like parents and teachers to help guide knowledge, and so we can make better decisions moving forward and how to help our kids in these situations. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
For sharing.
We have somebody connect with Scott.
All right, next on our sign-up sheet is Gary Wilson, but I don't believe he's here. Is he here? Oh, he left, okay. All right, well then, with that, there's no one else signed up, no one online. So we will then go ahead at this time, which is 7:26. The board is going to go into a recess to sign documents, followed by a workshop on board expectations, a legislative update, followed by an executive session under RCW 4230110 to discuss potential litigation. And that's expected to last about 30 minutes. Thank you.